The topic for this debate is, as most of you well know by now, is introverts versus extroverts. We have Rajan Seturaman speaking for extroverts and Rajan Venkatesan representing the introverts. The timer will run as follows. The timer turns green at 3 minutes 30 seconds, yellow at 4 minutes, and red at 4 minutes 30 seconds, after which the speakers will have 30 seconds to wrap up. Once both speakers are done with their prepared speech, we'll have them going head-on with their rebuttals, wherein we'll have 1 minute 30 seconds as green, 2 minutes for yellow, 2 minutes 15 seconds for red, and the last 15 seconds to wrap up. Artish here will be the timer for this entire meeting. Over to you, Rajans. Which of you wants to go first?
Rajan, you will go first?
You can go first, yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
Give me a second. We'll look for Artish. Is Artish visible on your screen?
Am I visible?
Yeah.
Could both of you pin him on your screen so that you'll know the time limits?
I've done that. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Artish, just say go and then we'll get started. Okay.
All right. Yes, you can start, Rajan.
Thank you for having me as part of this debate session. I'm going to kick it off with a joke that probably has been told in many versions. How many introverts are needed for a debate? The answer is only one, because it's not a group activity. Introverts, more often than not, are very busy, are comfortable introspecting, right, and talking with themselves. Personally, I wouldn't call myself an extrovert. It's that some people might consider as social or extrovert moments. Sometimes I enjoy having food on my own. There have been many occasions where I have undertaken a long train journey or a flight, and I actually sometimes prefer being on my own because I might be reading, right, or doing something which is very absorbing and interesting for myself. I also have felt that there have been a need for an extrovert participant or an extrovert friend, so to speak, at times when I have not been feeling in the best of my moods. There was a particularly extroverted friend I had on campus. I won't name him, but anytime I felt down in the dumps, for whatever reason, all it needed was just one visit to his room and spend time 5 to 10 minutes there, and you'll come out like you're feeling like you're top, you're king of the world. So that way, I was very lucky to have a lot of extroverted friends and companions through my growing up years, both in school and in college. But I've also felt the need to have an introvert friend, right, or a companion. Sometimes I get carried away, right, and I'm super excited, and you need a calming influence. You need a calming presence. And there have been people like that as well, right, who have helped me through the years. In some sense, for most people, there is a balance between this need for individualism and belonging, right? We all want to be treated in a very unique fashion when it comes to, say, education, right? Or our work and career opportunities. We just finished our performance management process. I'm sure that there'll be many people who would have said that I want to be recognized uniquely for what I have done and not be considered as part of the crowd. And even as consumers, right, we desire things that are particularly important and interesting for us. But at the same time, there is also this need to be part of a larger community, right? And we seek some version of extraversion, right, at that point in time, on how we can actually be a part of a larger group or a gathering. Interestingly, life and evolution is also shaped by both introversion and extraversion. Much of evolution starts as mutations in a single individual of the species, but then it has to get validated in a group setting on whether that mutation confers any distinct advantage to that individual within that species. So it's a bit of balance between introversion and extraversion, right, in that sense. Even the personal changes that we all make, we introspect and then we think through what is working for me and what is not working for me, and then we make those changes and we try and evaluate what is the impact that it is having on the larger society. How am I being perceived within the community or the group of people, right, that I'm interacting with? In some sense, I think all of life and evolution is also a balance and play between introversion and extroversion. Philosophically speaking, I think extroverts are like mirrors. They can reflect you as you are. Sometimes they can actually help diminish the image and sometimes enlarge the image, right? Make you look larger than life. But at the end of the day, you do need the substance on what is being reflected by those mirrors, by those extroverts. Introverts can sometimes truly benefit by opening up and using the extroverts that they interact with as a sounding board, right, as reflections to influence their own self. At the end of the day, the combination of the individual and the mirrors is what creates the kaleidoscopic effect. I wanted to end with a Zen koan. Gunin was the 5th Zen patriarch, and he put up a notice saying that I want to select my successor, and you guys have to write a koan which is profound. And one person wrote, "The body is a Bodhi tree, the mind is a mirror. Polish it with study, or dust will dull the image." But the poem that actually won was, "The Bodhi is not a tree. There is no mirror. All begins with nothing. Where can dust collect?" Let's all introspect on that. Thank you.
Over to you, Rajan Venkatesan.
Thank you, Rajan. Thank you, everyone, for giving me this opportunity. To begin with, what I would like to say is, the last time I remember debating was back in 11th standard. That was the last time I ever debated. So this is fairly almost like uncharted territory for me for quite some time, and therefore I'll try and do my best to do a follow-up to whatever Rajan just spoke. But I'd like to begin with a question to all of you. Who's the one person that you would, everyone, right, would spend the most time with in your lifetime? That would be you, right? An introvert, therefore, is someone who's actually comfortable being by himself. He's at ease being, within his own company, right? And therefore, I think the times that we live in give a lot of importance and sort of glorify people who are able to speak nicely, who are able to communicate well, who are able to be at ease in a large setting, right? And typically tend to shun introverts. They're often considered to be almost reserved or even pass off as rude sometimes, because they're just not willing to sort of interact as much as an extrovert would. But take it from me, if you had a boss, for instance, right, and all of us, Rajan just spoke about the fact that we've all had our performance appraisal cycle now. As a boss, if you're sitting in an appraisal discussion with your boss, would you want your boss to speak all the time, or would you want him to let you speak, right? And therefore, I would say that, having more introverts in this world will make the world a lot more, I would say, tolerable, because there's someone who's always there to listen to you, right? And therefore, having more introverts is actually a good thing. Now, having said that, there are a few things that I did want to bring up, right? One, introverts typically tend to get drained, or they get rapidly drained by social interaction. They are people who generally, if a couple of hours of social interaction would probably drain them, whereas there could be extroverts who could, for instance, if for an hour they don't have someone for company, they start feeling lonely. And therefore, introverts by their
Sorry for the inconvenience. Rajan has exited the meeting by mistake, I'm guessing. So while we're at that, I'll try to reintroduce the guests of dignitaries here. So we have, Raj introverted himself. So we have distinguished Toastmaster Satish Menon, District Director of D120. Satish Menon is one of the co-founders of Thirdware Solution Private Limited, an IT solutions and services organization. He has been a Toastmaster since 2013 and has risen up the ranks from club to district. He has been a star area director and a president distinguished division director. He makes it a point to visit 2 new places every year, is an avid collector and reader of books of any subject, and collects aviation memorabilia and aircraft models. Distinguished Toastmaster Gayatri, Club Growth Director. Gayatri is a software engineer by profession and a public speaker by passion, currently working as a project manager with DXC Technologies. She loves reading, singing, and cooking. She has been associated with Toastmasters International. She loves reading, singing, and cooking. She has been associated with Toastmasters International for the last 9 years and has served at various positions. She has been awarded as Star Area Director and Star Division Director for driving her area and division to President's Distinguished Status. She is the current Club Growth Director for District 120. Toastmaster Arun, Division Director. Arun worked as a service delivery manager and agile coach in IT corporates for the past 18 years, primarily working with global banking customers. He's an avid reader, developing his expertise on workplace engagement and performance. He has been in Toastmasters for the past 7 years. He currently serves as Division H Director. And now that we have Rajan Venkatesan back, we'll let him continue the speech.
I'm really sorry, guys. There was a Wi-Fi issue, and I just got back. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So I was just going to, going to wrap up my talk by talking about. So I come from a family where my father was a complete introvert, and my mother was a complete extrovert, right? And they spent their lifetime together. And I would say that they had a pretty happy married life, right? It's something that I did get to witness. But I enjoyed my interactions both with my father as well as my mother. My father was someone who was generally very uncomfortable when in a large crowd setting, but extremely jovial and extremely lively amongst people that he knew. And that's the one thing that you can always talk about introverts, right? It's not like they're one-dimensional. They love being lively around people that they like. My mother, on the contrary, was someone who always liked large gatherings. She's someone who enjoyed a lot of company. She's someone who likes to travel the world. She can go and pick up a conversation with a complete stranger. And therefore, I personally consider myself to be a perfect blend of the two. I don't think there is someone as a pure extrovert or a pure introvert. I think people oscillate from one end of the spectrum to the other from time to time. If you were a complete extrovert or a complete introvert, I think the only place that you would probably end up in is an asylum, because there are times when you need company, and there are times when you probably need to be by yourself. And with that thought, what I would like to end with is, it's not a bad thing to be an introvert. Sometimes it's good to go into the wilderness, rediscover yourself, spend time with yourselves, and come back, and you could probably give back to the community. That's how, if you look at all the ancient history in India, you look at Buddha, you look at even say Gandhi, you look at any modern yogi, right? They're all people who spend time doing a lot of sadhana or tapas, so to say, in by themselves, and they've come back and they've given a lot back to the community, and therefore being introvert has its own advantages, and it's nice to also be by yourself and find happiness in your own company.
So now that we've had both Rajan Venkatesan and Rajan Sethuraman give their speeches, so there is this quote of Bjork, who said that there are periods when I'm an extrovert and there are periods when I'm an introvert. It's a very natural progression in and out, kind of like the tide. So that's exactly what these two men have been talking about. Introvert or a pure extrovert. While we were at that, we also had people who said that all men become introverts after marriage. That's a funny comment section. Okay, so we'll have Rajan Sethuraman and Rajan Venkatesan going on their rebuttals. Rajan Sethuraman, you go first.
Thank you. I think both of us were ready to concede some ground, even as part of the first opening remarks. Maybe the question is also really about what do you lead with, right, in situations? And I agree that you need to pick the moments to be an introvert and pick the moments to be an extrovert. But today, in this age and time where social media is the rage and everybody is looking for some kind of validation and connectedness, I think it can be a little challenging, right, to start off at least on an introvert kind of a model. One needs to make the effort, even if they are an introvert, naturally to look at ways and means by which they can reach out and connect with people. And the connections that we establish are really what validates even our point of view at some times. And our own point of view, I mean, obviously emerges from the core of ourself, what we have learned, what we have experienced over the time and ages. But all of us also seek that validation. We want to be acknowledged by others that, yeah, my point of view is unique, and that there are others who can benefit from that point of view. So I think in some sense, therefore, it is important to lead with the front foot on being an extrovert. Introverts, the challenge oftentimes is that you need somebody's presence in order to make you stand out or shine. So it's not that introverts cannot be actually impactful, right, in terms of the society and how they participate. But there is an external stimulus needed in the form of being an extrovert. So why not be that extrovert, right? Why don't people take that action and be on the front foot in terms of saying that, let me reach out, let me put out my hand first, right? And let me take that initiative. So it's part of being that extrovert. So I think I would urge people, therefore, right, even if they are introverts, to look at it from balance and say that, you know what, I can be the person who extends my hand first. Yeah, I'll end with that. Thanks.
Yeah, I completely agree with Rajan Sethuraman. I'm somebody who has tried to convert a lot of people from being an introvert into an extrovert. But with that said, we'll listen to what Rajan Venkatesan has to say about this.
Fairly valid points, Rajan. But the one thing that I did forget to mention in my initial talk was the fact that if you've observed a child, right? I mean, all of us would have seen this. We would have been in the presence of children. Children typically, when they are in the company of someone who's unknown, right, they will be a little circumspect to begin with. They will take their time to get comfortable around that person, and over time, once they are comfortable, they would be, obviously very playful, right? And therefore, the point that I'm trying to make is being introverted and being a little circumspect is probably second nature to most of us, right? It's something that we all of us have it in us from the time we were a small child. It's just that the world that we live in forces us to like you mentioned, to be on the front foot, to be a lot more aggressive. Just to take an example of the Indian cricket team, for instance, right? I mean, if you compare the team of the 90s and the 2000s, the likes of a Dravid or a Tendulkar would typically let their bat do the talking. They're not people who would be very aggressive on the field. You compare that with the current crop of the cricketers, who typically have tattoos on their forearms, have fancy hairdos, right? And who are probably caught, shouting explicitives on the field, right? And maybe that's the brand of men or people that a lot of people like to idolize today, unfortunately. But having said that, if you go back and you ask anyone if a Dravid or a Tendulkar was less effective than a Kohli, the answer most likely would be no. And therefore, what I would like to reiterate is, you can be as effective as an extrovert, despite your own shortcomings in terms of not being able to express yourself. The effectiveness can still be as much as an extrovert.
Very valid points, Rajan Venkatesan. Now we'll have Rajan Sethuraman going for one last final closing statement on the same topic.
Yeah, I think I would agree with the point that Raj mentioned, that introverts can be effective in their own quiet way. But I think it is really the current milieu that in which we live that really begs the question, right? I mean, is the current situation one that allows people who are quiet on the side to be able to achieve things, right, in a fast and impactful fashion? I think we all need to change our styles and flex ourselves in relation to what is the need of the hour as well. Even if we take ourselves as an organization, we have had a 15-year quiet period, but today we want to be extroverted, right? We want to be in the limelight. We want to capitalize on all of the visibility that we are getting. And it doesn't make sense for us to be introverted and stay quiet, right? With that thought, I will say that there is a time for everything. Today, the time is to be an extrovert in the milieu and in the cultural situation in which we live. And I will leave it at that.
Final closing statements from Rajan Venkatesan.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm someone who considers myself to be fairly balanced, and my closing remark would be that you probably the need for the hour is actually to be neither an extrovert or an introvert. You probably are better off being an ambivert. I think this whole theory of extrovert versus introverts was brought up by a guy called Carl Jung, if I'm not wrong, right? He's the one who came up with this whole theory. And my own assessment or reading is that ambiverts are actually probably better off, right? Because they can, depending on the situation, you can choose to swing on either sides of the spectrum, right? And you can adapt to any given situation, and you don't feel drained by being by the compulsive need to be outgoing, right? Or you feel alone when you're not surrounded by people, and therefore being an ambivert is probably a better option as opposed to being either a complete introvert or an extrovert. With that, I'd like to end my talk as well.
I like how both of you have told that it's better to be an ambivert. With that in mind, thank you, Rajan Venkatesan. Thank you, Rajan Sethuraman, for spending your time here with us, initiating this club. If any of you from the audience have any questions for Raj or Rajan, now is the perfect time, folks.
Hey, this is Venkat. I just had a quick question. Raj or Rajan, whoever wants to answer, please go ahead. The question I had was, being an extrovert or an introvert, is that a choice that you make, or you're kind of born with that? So other way of looking at this is, being an extrovert or an introvert, is that you're born with, or is that something that you're made of as you grow?
Let me take a shot, and Raj, please add in. I think there is both the nature and nurture aspects at work. I guess that there might be some amount of influence based on genes and what we are born with, but there is also the process of going through different experiences in life. I don't know whether I have seen people who have changed completely from being an introvert into an extrovert or vice versa, notwithstanding the jokes about marriage and so on. But I have seen people shift on that spectrum, right, as Raj mentioned, and it is probably the ability to flex and move on that spectrum, right, that can make a difference for people. So I wouldn't therefore say that those who are introverts or extroverts, that they should give up hope of being the other or being able to flex to that style. But it's really a question of making that effort, right? Sometimes you just need to keep your mouth shut and then listen, right? And then be an introvert and think about what is being said. At other times, you do need to lead on the front foot. No, you need to say what you intend to say. I mean, there is a saying, right, that one saying is that speech is silver and silence is golden, and then it's corroborated by better to ask a question and appear a fool once rather than remain a fool for life. Whereas the counter to that is better to keep your mouth shut and think and have people think that you're an idiot rather than open your mouth and eliminate all doubt. So you have to think about like what kind of a situation you are in, and then accordingly.
Rajan, just to add to that, I've actually been at the receiving end of that last comment of yours. This was like very early in my career days where I was working with someone very senior, and I had exactly that. I happened to be in a meeting where someone told me that exactly, and I agree. I think being an introvert or an extrovert is to some extent probably inherent in the individual, but it's also a function of the times that you live in, the environment that you're in, your upbringing, the people around you, right? But as society, I think the environment at a school or the organizations that we work in typically call for us to be a lot more extroverted than introverted. But I think what would help people is if over time they pursue a career or pursue something that suits your personality in a way that you're able to make the best use of your abilities, right? Like for instance, someone like an introvert could probably make an excellent artist or make a graphic designer, for instance, right? Or be an excellent cook, and therefore choosing a profession that would complement your personality would probably be the best way to bring out the best in you.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions? Anybody from the audience?
Hey, Rajan and Rajan, this is Upen. So a quick question, right? I think both of you articulated what it means to be an extrovert, what it means to be an introvert, right? But just wanted to gather your perspective. I mean, leaving aside your style, how important is it to be cognizant of the style of the other person or the group of persons that you're interacting with? Is that also a determinant of your style, or is your style going to be independent, or should it be independent of what the rest of the group or gathering that you're part of is expecting you to behave?
Right. No, I think it is important to be aware of the styles of either the individual that you are interacting with or the group setting as well. You don't want to walk into a meeting where the other person is an introvert. And even if you are an introvert as well, right, or predominantly on the spectrum, if you have the responsibility of eliciting a conversation, right, of encouraging a discussion, you cannot adopt your natural style, because then neither party is going to say much, or it's going to be like just one word exchanges and then you don't accomplish much, right? So it is necessary to flex. Sometimes when you flex, you will also see that the other party flexes, right? Even if their natural style is one of being either an extrovert or an introvert, they will also flex to you, right? Because they see you. In general, that's what happens. Most people, if they spend enough time with another person, they start mirroring one another, right? Which is why I did that bit of a pun on the cocoa and the mirrors earlier, right? It's interesting to see that. I mean, it plays out a lot in especially marital relationships. People say that over a period of time, husbands and wives, right, spouses start becoming more and more like the other person in some way. So it's not a bad thing. I think flexing to the situation requires awareness of who the other person is and then adapting to that style. At the end of the day, you want to accomplish something, right, from that interaction, from that conversation, from that relationship even. And therefore, it makes sense, right, to have that awareness.
Actually, I didn't have anything else to add. I agree with.
Okay, we'll go for one last question from the audience, if anybody's got one. Okay, I'm guessing. Okay.
Hey, this is Geeta. I just wanted to know, is there a way to, or is there a training or something to learn where to be an extrovert and where to be an introvert? This is a tough choice that I have to make. Sometimes I feel the urge to say something, but then I feel like, okay, this might hurt someone or this might make me look like a fool. So how do I make the choice? How do I learn?
I like that suggestion from Vinay, but Raj, do you want to go first? I'll add in.
I mean, in terms of training, I think the fact that you're able to make the distinction, Gitanjali, that something that you might say may hurt someone, the fact that you're even able to come to that that sort of decision before you utter something is extremely. I think what I'm forgetting. I'm not able to get the right word, but I think the fact that you're empathetic and you're able to put yourself in someone else's shoes before you say something is a very good trait. And I think the fact that
Okay, did he drop off again?
I think you lost him. Yeah, I mean, I'll share my thoughts. I think that empathy point that Raj made is very important, because that demonstrates awareness. It connects back to the previous question, right, that Upendra was asking. Right? How do you become aware of the situation and the context, and then decide or determine how much you want to flex your own style? I think that awareness is important. Experience is the best teacher. I mean, I don't think anybody can list out a set of all kinds of contexts and situations in which it makes sense to be an extrovert or an introvert. It'll be a never-ending kind of a list. What matters is maybe the type of situations, right, and the role that you're playing. It is not just about the situation in terms of what other people are doing, but it is also about what your role within that context is. And if you are going to be acting as a catalyst, if you're going to be acting as somebody who's a bouncing board, you have to look at what is the role that you're playing in that context, right? And then just lead with what your gut tells you, right? I mean, do I shut up and listen a little bit more, or do I actually encourage a bit more conversation, right? Sometimes encourage even by throwing a few curveballs into the mix, or actually making some provocative statements, right? I mean, all of these things might be interesting and necessary, right, in that context. So it's about figuring out what is happening in that situation, right, and then playing to that audience in some sense.
Makes sense. Thanks, Rajan.
Thanks to both of you for spending your valuable time here, trying to tell us the difference between extroversion and introversion.